And we are live with Dr. Matt Bellace. Yeah, fix that hair, Matt. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks so much for doing this. We're not even going to talk about all of the technical challenges, but I want to give you a brief intro. He is a cousin. We put it back to our grandpops, right? If he's not catching a wave, right? He's cracking a joke legitimately. Matt is a stand-up comedian, did 10 years in NYC. He's cooking for his family, and today is Sydney's 7th birthday, your little girl, right? Yeah, and Roy, right? He's cooking for his family, or he's cheering on the healthy choices for all people, but in particular high school and college people. And you've done that for like over 20 years, and you're only 18, you know?
Yeah.
Matt, thank you so much. I'm so proud of what you do. And so thanks for your dedication to for many years. Would you mind bringing people up to snuff, like how you began? Because you have a unique perspective, right, in the wellness area. You did it as an undergrad, and now, you've continued, and now you're a dad. So, you're looking over your shoulder on that. So introduce it just briefly, if you would, please.
So it starts when I was a teenager, and I have a brother 5 years older than me who was going through some teenage things and getting into some trouble, hanging out with a rough crowd. My mom, who was an educator like yourself, she was concerned that I might go the same path. So she sent me to a leadership conference that I resisted, by the way. I fought really hard to not go, but it was an amazing experience. And I learned so much there about listening skills, empathy, met, people within the counseling world. And it kind of inspired me to want to get into psychology. Saw some wonderful speakers and stayed with that program. It's just a 1-week summer program, and every year I'd return. In college, I was inspired to start a student group, and I think that camp kind of led to that idea. That student group became so successful. It still exists on the campus of Bucknell University in Lewisburg, PA.
Right.
And the point of the group is to promote natural highs. So weekend activities, they're alcohol and drug free. We're not judging people. We're just putting them on and offering them at one of the top 5 party schools in the United States. So it was much needed, as you can imagine. And so that kind of set the foundation for me as I went into grad school. I got my master's in cell biology, then a PhD in neuropsychology. But all along, I was doing some speaking. And I tried to be funny with it. But until you actually get into comedy clubs, I don't think you can truly call yourself a comedian. And I started doing open mic nights in Philadelphia while I was at Drexel, a student for my doctorate. And I had a crazy life. I mean, it was just this balance of PhD, some speaking, some stand-up, and things were growing in the speaking and stand-up world. And when I finished my degree in 2005, it was clear that I could go full-time if I wanted to. And so I stopped a postdoc midway. I was doing a 2-year postdoc at Queens College in New York City when I moved up there. And I stopped it and said, all right, I just have to focus on the speaking piece. And so eventually the comedy kind of phased out into more speaking, and I stopped doing formal psychology. And for the last 13 years, I've been full-time as a professional speaker.
Yeah. And you've been doing very well. I want to go back to your Bucknell days. That was at a time, like you said, it's one of the top 5 party schools, right? We respect the first 4 letters of that university. And how was that choice as an undergraduate to actually choose a healthy lifestyle? How was it for you?
It was hard. And I'll be honest, if I didn't have those friends back home, I don't know how I would have done it. I mean, I tell students all the time, the number one predictor of your behavior is the friends you surround yourself with. And I found myself in this environment where it really felt like, oh, everybody's partying. Everybody's getting drunk every weekend, during the week, you name it. But in reality, it wasn't true. And what I realized was I had my friends back home supporting my decisions. And then I had to go search for people on campus who felt the same way. And by starting the student group, it actually drew those students to me. Right. And we created this family, or as you would say, family. They do down in South Jersey, right? And that's what the group became. And the university gave us a house. They took over a fraternity house, renovated it, gave it to my group. And then our family was able to exist in this, what I know is a healthier environment for college kids, have fun without the pressures of, drinking and doing drugs. And granted, there were people who probably thought we were losers, but we knew a lot of things that they didn't know. And to this day, I still share some of those insights with my audiences about wellness, just connecting with each other, listening. I mean, when you're drunk or high, you're not present in the moment. You're thinking about your high, you're someplace else mentally. But when you're not, when you're sober, you're there, and you have an opportunity, at least if you choose to take it, to really connect with people and develop deep friendships. And I think that's what was happening.
Right. And if we looked at well-being as a skill, Matt, this is where your neuroscience is going to come in. And we don't have to talk about neuroplasticity and all that, but maybe if you want, can wellness, well-being actually be a skill? Meaning if parents are watching now, or anyone who's watching now thinking, can I develop this? Can I cultivate this? Is there a way to do that? I think there is. Is there not?
No, there's no question. I mean, the pathways that are laid down by your brain, especially when you're young, sort of set you up for future success or not. And if you're practicing certain wellness techniques, I mean, you could take a look at exercise, for example, fitness. And I joke all the time, with my wife, it's amazing. Even if she's a runner and she ran from middle school all the way through college and competed. If she takes some time off, has an injury or something, and then gets back to it a month later, she gets back into form much more quickly. It's like the brain almost is programmed at that point to snap back, and so is the body, right? And so I think it's very similar in terms of if you lay a good foundation for how you live your life in terms of nutrition and habits, even if you get off the path, you can more quickly get back in line. So it all comes down to, the pathways that you're forming and strengthening over time. I mean, that's what you're referring to. I think when you say plasticity, well, the brain can certainly change. You can develop new habits, but when you're younger, I think it's the best time to lay down those pathways and keep them active, throughout your life.
Right. And you talk to young people all the time and in different stages through high school, through college. And just so anyone knows, if they want to get a hold of Matt, this is his website, mattbellace.com, right?
There it is. Yeah.
We'd be happy to come do this. But what are some of the questions? Because if parents particularly are looking down, they want to help their children or they want to create that environment. What are some of the things that can be done or that you talk about?
It depends on the age of your child and the needs that they have, of course. But the general advice I have for parents is to try your best to be empathic towards their situation. It's so easy for us to dismiss kids, what they're going through, especially teenagers. Oh, we've been there, it'll be fine, get over it, that whole mentality. But I think we're missing an opportunity to model for them what it means to be a good listener, what it means to talk about and identify emotions. Such a hot topic these days, right? We have, many angry young men often with weapons that want to hurt people. And you have to ask yourself, well, is there something we can do with our kids to help them just start by identifying the emotions they're feeling, identifying healthy ways to express the emotions, be it through conversation, laughter, exercise, what have you. And so laying down this foundation early on, talking about this with young people, how important it is, making it obvious to them that you really value as a parent healthier options. That stays with a kid, right? As they enter into the world and they see so many people choosing unhealthy things, and they'll say, no, my mother and father really value this path. I think that's ultimately what I'm going to choose. And most kids tend to do that. They tend to regress to the mean of their parents' value system later on.
That was an important thing. You talked two things. You said I think it's something, we're the sum of the five people we hang around all the time, in many ways, financially, emotionally. And you said something about the parents, right in the middle there, whatever they're modeling. But do people come to you maybe sometimes in crisis mode, and how would you respond if there's an issue and they're almost in crisis or in crisis? What do you do?
So as a clinical psychologist, I'm very quick to say, let's get you talking to a counselor or a psychologist to identify what's really going on. Because I know a presenting problem might not be the total picture. It does happen fairly regularly because I'll do a presentation and it's engaging and funny, and you'll get a kid who's like, oh, he's approachable. And so they'll come up, and I had a story one time, I'll never forget. This girl's in 8th grade. didn't even look like an eighth grader, looked really young. And she comes up to me, and there's a line of kids behind her. And she says, I've never told anybody this, but she tells a story about being sexually assaulted by her boyfriend, which is horrible, right? And then she begs me not to make her tell anyone. And my first thought was, everyone can hear you, right? I mean, like, they're all behind you. And the second thought was, well, I won't make you tell anyone, but as soon as you leave, I've got to get a hold of that counselor, that principal. We've got to get you talking to somebody, because, especially middle school kids, they just want to hold all this stuff inside. They don't have the language yet, maybe, to really express it to someone. So we've got to, as adults, give them that language, right? Give them the approval to say, it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to cry. It's okay to get angry about this stuff. But you've got to start fleshing it out, because the therapeutic process really strips away the emotions from the details of that traumatic event. And that's called getting over it. But we got to start that at some point.
Right. And just to clarify, going back now from my counselor days, if that would ever happen, there's a duty and obligation, rightfully so, and legally to report, right?
Sure.
And that's what you did by referring. But you don't have to do it in a way like you just described. You don't have to say, oh my God, pick up the phone. Yeah, I have to report this. There's a way to do it, but it requires a higher degree of intervention. But kudos to you too. Like you said, you strip away the Band-Aid, they feel comfortable to talk. And then for anyone listening, you do have options and pathways once that has happened, right? You're not going to be alone with that. And so you've outlined some of the steps. I talked about you having a great vantage in the perspective. So you thank you about talking about undergraduate. It is tough. It's tough today if you're going to stand up, and you have to be very strong, but at least there's strength in numbers, right? What have you noticed, rather than me capsuling, what have you noticed about your audiences in the past 10 or 15 years? Do you notice any what are some of the trends? Yeah, what's happening?
Changes. I mean, on the positive side, 15 years ago, if I brought up a student to volunteer and I was asking that student some questions, and the student was atypical, they were a male who didn't fit the criteria of masculinity. You might get a kid, I can almost guarantee you get a kid yelling something out at that student. Right. And that never happens. I mean, it just doesn't happen anymore. It hasn't happened for years. And so I feel like in many ways, the atypical kid is celebrated, applauded, liked in a way that they've never been before. And I think that's to their benefit, obviously, but it really speaks to what schools have done, to really make people more tolerant and just, supportive of each other in the school system. So I find that to be great. Obviously, technology has eroded attention spans, and you could look at that all as a negative, but I see it as a challenge I've got to sort of rise to as someone who's speaking in front of them. I can't just go out there and be slow and boring at any point. Like, it literally has to be, engaging at every step of the way, or you will lose the audience. You will. And if you sense that you're losing the audience, then you've got to be very real and in the moment, because that's how you get people back. You got these kids, they're trained to be distracted now, to leave that moment, go somewhere else. So as a psychologist, my role is, how do I get you here, present mentally? And if you're on that screen, you're being rude and disruptive by just looking at it and ignoring me, we have to address it in a way that I think helps you. It's not just to like yell and scream at someone, but educates you, to make you more empathic towards the speaker in front of the room. So I find, like, in many ways it is more challenging, but it's also a better program as a result of that, right? Because it forces you to be better, or they're not going to bring you in to do it.
Right. So well spoken. And let's just transition, say, to a parent who might be listening right now. You're right. They are trained. It's their being to be distracted. How do you get their attention other than, what our parents used to do? Let's go, right? Sure. We're Italian. What are some of the things a parent might choose to do?
I think trying to be mindful and being in the moment, like when you see a kid who's not able to receive your message at that moment, right? You're trying to tell them something and they're not listening. You might say, look, I can tell that this is not a good time. Let's give it a few minutes. We'll come back to you when you're really when you're here, when you're with me on this. Obviously, if they have a screen in front of their face, that's not the time to communicate either. You might set boundaries on screen time. Like, hey, when we're sitting down to have a conversation, we put the screens to the side, both of us, and we talk for real.
Yeah. Would you mind repeating that? Because I think that's a personal, I'm injecting here, like, what can we say about the glow of that screen?
Yeah. Did you get a text? Is that what happened there?
Yeah, that's what happened.
No, I totally get it. Yeah. I mean, so many families practice vacations from screen time, be it at a meal or certain hours of the evening or for a whole weekend. And that's what I try to do. And I'm trying to communicate with my kids. You want to make sure all those things are off and away. And if you notice they're not with you and paying attention, you give them the opportunity in a few minutes. Like, that makes them aware that you're aware.
Mm-hmm.
If we just try to blow through this stuff and just say, as a parent, like, oh, they don't care about this, but I'll just lecture them anyway, and it'll be lost on them. But I'll just do this because it makes me feel good. Well, that's serving you perhaps because you're getting off your chest, but it's not doing anything for them, and it actually reinforces this idea that they're going to escape mentally from you when you start talking.
Yeah, and that just happens, and putting their hands up and like almost saying, then go away. But you just said, we're gonna turn that off, and we're just gonna be present and use those words, and it takes time and it takes practice, doesn't it? Yeah, and it's just like the brain. New behaviors take time and repetition. And repetition is the mother of trust and faith. That's what's going to get us through with the brain. Am I on the right track there with research?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it strengthens those pathways. I remember being in a comedy club more than one occasion, and always fascinated by a comedian who was so aware of himself or herself that they would maybe say a word that was a little funny. And then they'd make fun of themselves for saying the word in a funny way. Like they messed up the word, they messed up the punchline. But they didn't just push through it. If you just push through it and think, well, maybe they didn't notice, or I'm just going to blow through that, it actually affected the rest of your set. You could feel the audience kind of pull back. Right. But when the comedian was so self-aware that they immediately made fun of themselves for messing up the simple word, that brought the audience in because it's like, oh, he's here with us. Right? He's not just doing a rehearsed set and he doesn't care who we are. He's with us. And I think kids sense that too. If you're a parent who's on a rant and you could do it to a wall, then why don't I just check out? Who cares? But if the parent is like, no, you got to be with me on this, the kid is going to be more with you. Your message is going to be heard, and you're going to feel like you get further with them.
I thank you for that. And it sounds easy to do, but it's true. And I laugh at myself if I mispronounce something, but at least I'm acknowledging and pulling people in, right? And you got to be authentic. Yep. The other thing is there is hope for resiliency. I want to stress that. You and I both know it with the research, but it's not teaching, but you can build resiliency. The idea of coming back quicker. It can happen, right? It's in the mindfulness, if anyone wants to look it up. But just reinforce that, please, for parents and keep people out there. You can build a skill. You can build it.
Absolutely. And one of the things I talk about in my programs a lot is about dealing with disappointment and how, whether it's small disappointments or large ones, that's an opportunity for you to build resilience by reframing that loss, that disappointment as, hey, what can I get out of this? Like, this wasn't fun. I wish it didn't happen, but it did. So what now, right? Can I take the energy from that negative thing and use it to my advantage? And as I look at my life, every major disappointment I've had has led to something bigger and better in my life. And I just, it's amazing to me how the emotions from the disappointments, you often fueled me to say, okay, now I'm going to get better at something, get smarter at something. And we forget to remind our kids of this. Perfection, this idea of, oh, you have to get the straight A's to get into the perfect college, to get the perfect job, to make this money. It's flawed thinking. Some kids can do that, but most kids can't, and it's unhealthy for them to strive to that level of perfection, but rather, pursue things you're passionate about. And when you fail and when you struggle, use that.
Not an if, but when, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Build it into them. And the more disappointments you have when you're young and you're under your parents' roof and you can use them as teaching opportunities, I do believe the better off you'll be later on when you're on your own. And what we're seeing with teens now, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is like this idea that they lack resiliency because their parents are doing everything for them, and they're getting the participation trophy, and life is they're like jellyfish floating in the Caribbean, and they're in the temperature controlled rooms and everything's there for them. So when disappointment visits and you get cut from the team or dumped by the girl or fail the test, fantastic. Don't rush in as a parent and try to save the day and I'm going to sue the school. No, embrace the disappointment, even if it's unfair, and say, okay, this is an opportunity. How are we going to cope with this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then in your speeches and at home, and then you talk about coping mechanisms. I mean, there's no one size fits all, and at least you go through it. I would be so encouraged if I, as a youngster, hearing someone like you say that. And so I have on the screen how people can get a hold of you, mattbellace.com, right? You do high schools through colleges, even to Ontario for my network there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to give you an invite and you can reserve, but I'd love to come back. I'd love to come back with you if you're open to it. And I'd love to talk about wellness, but you talked a little bit in your other videos about marijuana research, and off camera, we've talked about CBD, but maybe we could talk about that aspect too with research based, in terms of what's happening in our society, if you're open to it. I'll just say, think about that, but the invitation is open, right?
Absolutely. It's a hot topic. And, for my audiences, I'm very much about trying to build up their sense of agency. I don't want them to feel they need a chemical of any kind. I don't want them to have caffeine to wake up or some pill to go to sleep. But if you're looking at people with chronic pain, cancer patients, people who are early in need, I think it's a tricky world out there, right? There's a lot of companies that would love to have you on their pill every single day of your life. And so navigating that and trying to get you to a place that's healthier so you feel more sort of stable and in control, I think that's a real goal, especially for a lot of adult audiences I work with. I was at a pharmaceutical company last week, and they make some amazing, like an oncology drug, an eczema drug, and it was great to be able to talk about these things, with them, because medications can help our lives, but they also can rule our lives.
Right.
Figuring out that pathway, so important. But how to come back from it?
Yeah, happy to come back, because you're in wellness and I'm in wellness with Viseo, but there's a lot of points of intersection. And you've given me time on your daughter's birthday, and I think, and I will leave on the note that one of the best things, no, you have many, but you put up Roy, that's your son's first hit. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it was, do you remember what, I'm sure you remember what it was, his first hit in baseball. What was it? Do you remember?
Yeah, so All-Stars this summer was the first time, because he just started facing kid pitch.
Right.
And, he would think, it's funny because he thought a hit was simply, oh, you hit the ball and it's fair. And even if he got thrown out, oh, I got a hit. No, that's not how it works. But he got in a pressure situation, bases loaded, all-star game in the summer, and he hit a line drive over the second baseman's head. And it was, one of those moments as a parent that you're just so excited for them, so filled with pride and just beaming, and talk about a natural high that was like, I was smiling for the rest of the night.
There it is.
So proud of him.
And you posted the ball, and I even posted it on mine, and that's what good dads do, and give him an attaboy for me. And I believe your mom also volunteered at one time at the Yogi Berra Museum, right?
She did. Yeah. I used to speak there because of her. They used to do a leadership academy. I get to meet Yogi thanks to my mom, and that was such a wonderful experience. She's a huge sports fan, a former coach herself. And that really inspired me as a kid to use sports. And what a great tool for teaching disappointment, by the way, right?
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. And a big shout out to your mom, Louise, who's a respected, renowned educator. And thank you for everything, especially thank you for Matt Bellace. So, Matt, you're coming back, right? I'm going to hold you to it.
Yes.
All right. And if you want, you can reach him at mattbellace.com. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. We're going to sign off now, okay?
Take care.
Take care.
Mm-hmm.